One awakens not by finding new answers, but by ceasing to believe the old ones. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. You wake up in the morning, and there's nothing. No fire, no hunger, just the same weight in your chest that's been there for years. It's not pain anymore. It's numbness. It's not sadness. It's something deeper, like something inside of you died quietly a long time ago, and you've been pretending to be alive ever since. You go through the motions, you smile, you answer messages, you do what you have to do. But deep down, it's hollow. You can't name it. You can't explain it to others. And that's the worst part. You look like you're functioning, but inside, you're slowly disappearing. This is not depression. This is not burnout. This is the first sign. You can no longer pretend to be who you're not. The mask doesn't fit. The role is cracking, and the world around you starts to feel fake. You begin to notice things you used to ignore. Conversations feel shallow. The noise of the world feels louder. You can't lie to yourself anymore. That's the first crack, and it's sacred, because that's the first sign of awakening. Not the glamorous kind you see in books, not the peaceful enlightenment people post about. No, the real awakening starts in pain, in discomfort, in a silent scream no one hears. And here's the second sign. Everything that used to comfort you stops working. The quotes, the podcasts, the therapy, the mindfulness apps, the yoga classes. You've tried. God knows you've tried. But nothing lands. Nothing touches that place inside of you that's aching for something real. You don't want more answers. You want truth. You don't want more tools. You want to remember who you are beneath all the noise. And here's what most people won't tell you. That feeling of nothing works is not failure. It's not regression. It's your soul rejecting the fake healing. The surface level fixes, the systems that taught you how to cope, but never how to feel. This isn't weakness, it's intelligence. A deeper part of you is waking up, the part that refuses to settle for half alive. And here comes the third sign. Your sensitivity starts to rise, not in a poetic, beautiful way, in a raw, overwhelming way. You walk into a room and feel the tension. You scroll your phone and sense the manipulation. You listen to someone speak and hear the lie behind the words. You're not too sensitive. You're starting to see clearly. You're not breaking down. You're breaking open. And I know it's terrifying, because once you start to see, you can't unsee. Once you start to feel, you can't go back to numb. But I'll tell you this, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're waking up. The fourth sign is quiet, but brutal. The world around you starts to lose its meaning. What once made sense now feels hollow. You begin to question everything. Your job, your goals, your relationships, your daily routines, not because you've become lazy or lost, but because the illusion is fading. You start to see how much of your life was built to please, to perform, to survive, not to live. You look at the system and realize it was never designed to help you awaken. It was designed to keep you asleep. Every structure, education, media, politics, even wellness culture begins to show its cracks. You see how deeply you've been shaped to fit in, behave, obey, strive, succeed, and it disgusts you, not in a bitter way, but in a tired one, because somewhere deep down, you know, this isn't what life is supposed to be. Then comes the fifth sign, a strange kind of anger. It doesn't look like rage. It looks like quiet rebellion. You no longer play along. You stop laughing at things that aren't funny. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop pretending to care about things that drain you. This is the beginning of your nervous system unfreezing. The suppressed emotions start to surface. Grief, rage, sorrow, even joy you've forgotten how to feel. It's not graceful, it's messy, it's human, and it's necessary because the system taught you to numb. Now, you're remembering how to feel. This is what most therapists never tell you. Real healing doesn't feel good at first. It feels like falling apart. But falling apart is how the false self dies. The sixth sign is physical. Your body begins to protest. Fatigue without reason, tension in the chest, sudden tears, insomnia, or the opposite, wanting to sleep all the time. This isn't illness. It's your body trying to process everything your mind suppressed for years. All the moments you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. All the trauma stored in your muscles, in your gut, in your jaw. This is somatic awakening. And it's real. You can't think your way through it. You have to feel your way through. Your body isn't betraying you. It's finally speaking. Loudly, clearly, desperately. And here's the moment that shatters the old paradigm. You realize you've been doing everything right by the book. You read the self-help. You did the therapy. You journaled, meditated, manifested. But now you see it. The goal was never to be better. The goal was to remember you were never broken. And that changes everything. Because now the question isn't, how do I fix myself? It's, what have I been hiding from? That's the turn. That's the crack where truth enters. And truth never comforts at first. It destroys. Then it frees. The seventh sign comes with a strange hunger, not for food, success, or stimulation, but for silence. You start to crave stillness in a way you never have before. Crowds drain you. Small talk exhausts you. Even your own thoughts feel too loud. It's not depression. It's not avoidance. It's your soul trying to make space. You feel the pull to be alone, not because you're isolating, but because you're finally making room for your own voice to speak. The noise of the world no longer distracts you the way it used to. And for the first time, solitude feels like home. This is the beginning of inner anchoring, where you start to reconnect with something deeper than the mind, something ancient, something that was always there beneath the surface. You start to realize that clarity doesn't come from information. It comes from emptiness, from sitting with yourself without trying to escape. Then it hits the eighth sign. The idea of becoming someone starts to collapse. All your life, you were taught to chase an identity, to build, to grow, to improve, to evolve. But now, none of it excites you. The more you think about goals, the more absurd they seem. It's not that you've given up. It's that your definition of success is being rewritten. You start to see how much of your drive came from fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being invisible. Fear of failure. You see how the image of the better version of yourself was just another mask, another trap. And without that drive, without that illusion, a quiet peace begins to emerge. You no longer want to prove anything. You just want to be. This terrifies the ego, but it frees the soul. And then something even stranger begins. You start seeing patterns, not just in your own behavior, but in everything. Life begins to feel like it's showing you something. People enter your life with perfect timing. Old wounds resurface as if asking to be seen. Symbols repeat, emotions mirror. It's subtle, but undeniable. This is the ninth sign. Synchronicity begins to guide you. You no longer experience life as random. You feel watched, not by others, but by something within. You're not being tested. You're being remembered. This is not magic. It's not mysticism. It's awareness. And with awareness comes responsibility. At this point, you may feel more lost than ever. But that's because the map you were following was never yours. It was handed to you by parents, by culture, by systems that never knew who you truly were. Now, you're stepping off the path. Now, you're learning to walk without knowing where it leads. And this right here is the threshold. This is where most people turn back, reach for comfort, numb the symptoms, go back to sleep. But you're still here. You're listening, which means something in you is ready. Not for answers, not for healing, but for truth. And the truth is this: awakening is not a feeling. It's not a moment. It's a process of shedding everything you thought you had to be, until all that's left is what you always were. And now comes the most painful part: the confrontation with your shadow. Not the poetic idea of a shadow, not the abstract Jungian concept, but the real, raw, personal shadow. The version of you that holds the rage you were never allowed to express, the jealousy you were taught to hide, the guilt that ate away at you in silence, the grief you never got to grieve. When you start to awaken, all of it comes up, not to punish you, but to finally be seen. And most people run at this point because this is where the inner war begins. One part of you wants to transcend it all. Another part wants to burn it all down. But awakening means you stop fighting both. You look directly at the parts of yourself you were conditioned to exile, and you say, "I see you." That's the beginning of integration. Not healing through fixing, but healing through seeing. What most psychologists won't tell you is that your symptoms are not problems, they're communication. Your anxiety is a boundary that was never respected. Your depression is a protest against a life that never felt real. Your emotional triggers are old wounds that were never held with care. The system medicalizes, pathologizes, categorizes, but your psyche is not a machine. It's a story that was never allowed to be fully told. And you don't need a diagnosis to validate your pain. You need space to feel it without shame. That's the revolution. That's where true healing begins. In the act of reclaiming your right to hurt, to rage, to question, to unravel without needing to justify it to anyone. At some point in this process, your relationship with others begins to shift. You stop trying to save people. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing approval. Why? Because you've started to see the unconscious contracts you've made, the invisible roles you've played in order to feel safe, accepted, loved. You were the helper, the strong one, the one who kept the peace, the one who made others comfortable. But now you feel it. The cost of all those roles was your own truth, and you begin to let them go. Not to punish others, but to finally meet yourself. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You become honest. And that honesty becomes a boundary. This is where real relationships begin, and where most artificial ones end. As this process deepens, your connection to your body becomes unavoidable. You start to realize that no amount of thinking will save you. You've analyzed enough. You've journaled enough. You've tried to intellectualize your pain. And it hasn't worked. Because trauma doesn't live in the mind. It lives in the body. It shows up in your chest when you speak your truth. In your gut when you betray yourself. In your throat when you swallow your emotions. The body keeps the score, not as a metaphor, but as a daily reality. And now, as you awaken, you begin to listen. Not to fix, to listen, to sit with the tremble, to breathe through the contraction, to touch the place that aches without needing it to stop. This is how the nervous system rewires, not through control, but through presence. There is something else you begin to feel, something you were never taught to trust, your own inner guidance. Not intuition as a mystical idea, but as a subtle knowing that comes when the noise quiets. You start to notice how your body contracts around lies and expands around truth. You start to trust your discomfort as a signal, not a problem. You no longer override yourself for the sake of being liked, accepted, or chosen. You start to choose yourself, not in a self-help way, but in a quiet, grounded, unapologetic way. That shift is irreversible, and it's terrifying, because it means stepping into the unknown, without guarantees, without maps, without permission. But it's also the most honest thing you'll ever do. And here's the paradox. The more you wake up, the less you feel the need to convince anyone of anything. You stop debating. You stop proving. You stop trying to be understood by those who aren't ready to listen. Why? Because you've understood yourself. Not completely, but enough to stop outsourcing your worth. And that changes everything. The world doesn't get less chaotic. The people around you don't suddenly become conscious. But you become rooted. You feel the storm, but you're no longer inside it. You feel the fear, but you're no longer ruled by it. And for the first time, maybe in your whole life, you feel free. Not because the pain is gone, but because it no longer owns you. Eventually, something shifts deep inside you. You stop searching for the exit. You stop waiting for the breakthrough, the moment of clarity, the final healing. You begin to understand that there is no finish line, no final version of you to arrive at. And instead of chasing transformation, you begin to live the truth that's already here. That truth isn't glamorous, it's not always pleasant, but it's real. And real starts to feel better than good. You begin to breathe differently. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You respond instead of react. You notice how often the world is trying to pull you back into speed, urgency, performance. But now, you feel it in your body. And more importantly, you feel when it's a no. That awareness becomes your compass. Not perfection, not productivity, presence. You also begin to realize that power is not what you thought it was. It's not control. It's not dominance. It's not about being above anyone else. True power is self-possession. It's the ability to sit in your truth without needing to convince or defend. It's the ability to stay grounded when others project, attack, misunderstand, or try to manipulate. You start to feel where your energy leaks, in trying to be liked, in trying to fix others, in trying to prove your value. And you slowly begin to seal those leaks, not out of coldness, but out of self-respect, because now you understand. Love without boundaries is not love. It's self-abandonment. And clarity, no matter how painful, is kinder than pretending. This is maturity, not the performance of adulthood, but the embodiment of sovereignty. In this stage of awakening, you begin to feel grief, not because something went wrong, but because you see so clearly now what never was. You grieve the years you spent performing. You grieve the relationships where you betrayed yourself just to belong. You grieve the childhood wounds that shaped your nervous system before you had a choice. You grieve the version of you that tried so hard to survive in a world that never felt safe. This grief is not weakness. It's not self-pity. It's sacred. It's the final layer that softens the armor. You no longer fight your tears. You no longer rush your healing. You begin to hold yourself the way no one else ever did. And in that act of inner parenting, something astonishing happens. You start to feel whole, even in your brokenness. Not because the pain is gone, but because you're no longer ashamed of carrying it. There's a moment in this journey that feels like death, and it is. The death of who you thought you had to be, the death of the false self, the roles, the illusions. But right behind that death is birth. Not of something new, but of something original, something ancient, something that was always there, waiting beneath the performance. And when that emerges, there's no turning back. You stop being a seeker. You stop being a project. You stop being someone who needs fixing. You simply start being fully, imperfectly, and unapologetically. This is what real awakening looks like. Not escaping the human experience, but becoming fully human, feeling it all, holding it all, loving through it all. So if you're still here, if any part of this spoke to something inside you that you've never been able to name, then maybe you're already further along than you thought. Maybe all the breakdowns, all the discomfort, all the questions that wouldn't let you sleep, maybe they weren't the problem. Maybe they were the call, the signal that something deeper was waking up inside of you. And maybe that something has been waiting your whole life for you to finally say, I'm ready. If you recognized yourself in these words, write in the comments, I'm no longer running from pain. Let's see how many of us are ready for the truth. This is only the beginning. So how do you know it's real? How do you know this isn't just another phase, another emotional wave, another idea you'll outgrow? You know it's real because you stop needing certainty. You stop asking, is this it? And start trusting what's here. Awakening doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with subtle shifts that change everything. You speak differently, slower, more honestly. You listen without waiting to respond. You no longer betray yourself to keep the peace. You feel discomfort in your body and sit with it instead of escaping. These are not small things. They're signs of return to your own inner ground. You also begin to notice what no longer fits. Conversations that once excited you now drain you. Environments that once felt normal now feel heavy. The need to explain yourself fades. You walk away from things quietly, not because you're cold, but because peace matters more than drama. You don't argue with people who aren't ready. You don't chase anyone who walks away. You're not above anyone. You're just no longer below yourself. That's the real evidence. Not how high you feel, but how deep you're willing to stay. Now the practical part, what can you do with all this? First, stay close to your body. Every emotion has a physical echo. When you feel triggered, don't ask, why am I like this? Ask, where do I feel this? And place your hand there. Breathe into it. Let the energy move instead of holding it back. Second, create a truth practice. 5 minutes a day to write down what you're actually feeling without editing. No goals, no fixing, just raw honesty. Third, observe your language. Every time you say, I have to, pause. Ask, is that true? And notice how many of your obligations are inherited lies. And last, don't rush. Awakening is not a project. It's a return to slowness, to presence, to depth. You're not here to become someone new. You're here to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And if you're already doing that, even in the smallest ways, then yes, you're on the path. Not perfectly, not completely, but truly. And that's what matters. If you feel ready to face your shadow, write in the comments, my darkness is my power. Let's create a space for those who aren't afraid to look within. This isn't the end. It's the return to the beginning, the one that was always waiting beneath the noise. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.